For more than 1,000 years, Constantinople stood between continents. It was the city of emperors, traders, soldiers, priests, and scholars. A capital built where Europe met Asia, where the Black Sea opened into the Mediterranean, and where the Roman world survived long after Rome itself had fallen. Its walls had turned back armies for centuries. But by the spring of 1453, the city was no longer the heart of a great empire. It was a remnant, a shadow of its former imperial glory. Behind its ancient defenses, the last Byzantine emperor, Constantine XI, ruled over a shrinking capital surrounded by Ottoman power. Outside the walls stood Sultan Mehmed II. He was young, ambitious, and determined to do what many before him had failed to do. The Sultan's ultimate goal was clear: take Constantinople. It was a mission that would change history. The siege that followed would not simply end a city's independence. It would become one of history's clearest symbols of one age giving way to another. To understand the fall of Constantinople, we have to look beyond the final battle. The Byzantine Empire had once controlled vast territories across the eastern Mediterranean. It preserved Roman law, Greek learning, Christian theology, and imperial traditions for centuries. But by the 15th century, that world had been reduced almost beyond recognition. The Fourth Crusade dealt Constantinople a devastating blow in 1204, when Western Crusaders captured and plundered the city. Although the Byzantines eventually recovered it, the empire never fully regained its former strength. Over the following centuries, territory was lost, wealth declined, and rival powers rose around it. By 1453, the Byzantine Empire was little more than Constantinople itself and a few scattered possessions. The city still looked formidable from a distance. Its land walls were among the strongest defensive systems ever built in the medieval world. But inside, Constantinople was weakened. Its population had fallen sharply from earlier centuries. Whole areas within the walls were sparsely inhabited. Churches, palaces, and old monuments stood as reminders of a power that had faded. The city was still magnificent, but it was also vulnerable. Mehmed II understood what Constantinople represented. For the Ottomans, the city was a strategic prize. It controlled key routes between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. It sat at the center of lands already dominated by Ottoman power. It was also a symbol. As long as Constantinople remained unconquered, the old Byzantine world still endured. In April 1453, Mehmed began the siege. His forces surrounded the city by land and sea. The exact size of his army is debated, but it was far larger than the defending force inside the walls. The defenders were a mixture of Byzantines, Genoese, Venetians, and others who had come to help hold the city. They were heavily outnumbered, yet they had the walls. For weeks, Ottoman cannon battered the ancient defenses. Gunpowder artillery had been used before, but at Constantinople it demonstrated something increasingly clear. Even the greatest medieval fortifications could now be seriously threatened by sustained cannon fire. The walls did not collapse all at once. They were damaged, repaired, and damaged again. At night, defenders worked to rebuild what the cannon had shattered during the day. The siege became a contest of endurance, stone against gunpowder, faith against hunger, a fading empire against an expanding one. Constantinople's geography had always been part of its strength. On one side was the Sea of Marmara. On another, the Golden Horn, a sheltered inlet protected by a great chain stretched across its entrance. That chain helped prevent enemy ships from entering the harbor. But Mehmed found a way around it. Ottoman ships were moved overland and launched into the Golden Horn. The exact route and details remain debated by historians, but contemporary accounts agree that Ottoman vessels appeared where the defenders had hoped the harbor would remain secure. The effect was psychological as much as military. The defenders now had to guard more of the city's long perimeter. For those inside Constantinople, the sense of being surrounded deepened. Still, the city did not surrender. Constantine XI continued to organize the defense. Appeals for greater Western aid had brought only limited support. Religious and political divisions between Eastern and Western Christians had not disappeared, even in the face of disaster. Inside the walls, there were prayers, councils, repairs, and shortages. Outside the walls, Mehmed prepared for the final assault. By late May, the siege had reached its breaking point. The walls had been weakened, the defenders were exhausted, supplies were running low. On the night before the final assault, the city waited. In Hagia Sophia, the great church of Constantinople, people gathered in prayer. It was a moment heavy with centuries of memory. This was not just another city under siege. To its people, Constantinople was the new Rome, the last capital of an empire that had claimed continuity with the Caesars. The final assault began before dawn on May 29, 1453. Ottoman troops attacked in waves. The first assaults tested and exhausted the defenders. Then more experienced forces pressed toward damaged sections of the land walls. At some point in the fighting, the defense began to break. Giovanni Giustiniani, a key Genoese commander, was wounded and removed from the walls. His departure appears to have shaken morale at a critical moment. Ottoman forces forced their way into the city. Constantine XI disappeared in the final fighting and is widely believed to have died defending the city. The last Byzantine emperor fell as his capital fell. By morning, Constantinople belonged to Mehmed. The fall of Constantinople ended the Byzantine Empire as a functioning imperial state centered on the ancient capital. That statement is simple. Its meaning is not. For the Ottomans, the conquest was a defining triumph. Mehmed entered the city as a conqueror and would later be remembered as Mehmed the Conqueror. Constantinople became the Ottoman capital, and over time the city would become known internationally as Istanbul. For the Christian powers of Europe, the fall was a shock. A city long seen as a barrier, a symbol, and a sacred imperial capital had passed into Ottoman hands. But the fall of Constantinople did not single-handedly create the modern world. History rarely changes because of one event alone. The Renaissance was already underway in parts of Italy. Trade networks were already shifting. Gunpowder weapons were already transforming warfare. European states were already searching for new routes, new wealth, and new power. Yet 1453 became one of the great dividing lines historians return to. It marked the end of the last imperial state claiming direct continuity with Rome. It showed that medieval walls could no longer guarantee survival. It strengthened Ottoman control over the Eastern Mediterranean and the Balkans. And it reminded Europe that the balance of power had changed. The title is symbolic. The Middle Ages did not end in a single day. No church bell rang across Europe announcing a new era. No one woke the next morning in a fully modern world. But some days reveal a change that has been building for generations. May 29, 1453, was one of those days. Yet 1453 became one of the great dividing lines historians return to. It marked the end of the last imperial state claiming direct continuity with Rome. A medieval capital became an Ottoman capital. A world of stone walls, imperial relics, and old claims gave way to a world increasingly shaped by canon, centralized states, expanding empires, and global exploration. The fall of Constantinople was not the only beginning of the modern age, but it was one of its clearest signals. A city that had stood at the center of history for more than 1,000 years had fallen. And with it, one of the longest chapters in human civilization came to a close. If this documentary helped you understand the fall of Constantinople, like the video and subscribe to Fault Lines of History for more stories of the turning points that changed civilization.